I know you're strong, I know you're tough. You wanna sit, you need to move. Let me show you how to do it. Feel the music, hey.
Coming to you from Forager Brewery in Rochester, our town.
When it's going bad, don't think too much about it. Just keep your head.
Start now with a quote from William Murtaugh, who was the first keeper of the National Register of Historic Places. He said, "At its best, preservation engages the past in a conversation with the present over a mutual concern for the future." Well, that was a lot of words. Jeff, you do historic preservation?
I do.
Is that kind of what we're after? Preserving the future by looking at the past?
I think we have a legacy and a story to tell.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that makes our communities and our nation and our families strong.
Wonderful volunteer work and other work that you do on construction. As chair right now of the Rochester Heritage Preservation Commission, it's an active, very contentious group at this time. Usually you wouldn't think of historic preservation. Is it that, is there always strong emotions when you're talking about old buildings and maintaining them?
Well, yes, the answer to your question, the short answer is yes. I think an example I would tell you, for example, if you had your grandmother's wedding ring, that might be the most treasured keepsake in your home for your kids and your grandkids, but by the time it goes to the pawn shop, it becomes just platinum again. So how do you integrate that story? Well, how do you divine the story, where a lot of times it's lost and you have to rediscover it, and also where is the in preservation in particular, we struggle with the intersection of public and private rights. If you own a building and I think it's historic, should I make you keep it the way it always was? And that comes to the core of some of these issues today.
And your service is great on this commission because you do this for a living with the refurbishing of old buildings, but also you're an arbitrator with construction disputes. So you've been at this a long, long time. And of course, as everyone knows, Rochester is going through a real rebirth in the downtown area, primarily with the DMC project and other things.
Well, it's a boom, and so which are important and which are just old is a delicate slider, and many of the times these, in particular in Rochester, there are 8 strong activists who are self-appointed. They're not elected. They're not appointed by the city council, but they have the strongest voice. And to try to balance them against the rights of the individual owners and the Rochester area builders and the Chamber of Commerce and the Board of Realtors, you know, they have this tough issue.
Do you enjoy this work?
Partly it boils down to owner rights.
I mean,
I find meaningful work in it. As an Eagle Scout and a community activist, I take on some of these messy, hard jobs, sometimes because I think I'm qualified to do them, even when they're not that much fun.
Days in, downtown, folks may have been following that along. That's been a big issue, what to do with that building, and we're kind of, what are we, in a holding pattern now, sort of, on the status of it?
New information continues to evolve weekly. The short answer is it's some of the oldest hotel rooms that were here 100 years ago when Will and Charlie Mayo practiced. So there were 2,000 hotel rooms 100 years ago, and these are still largely in the same configuration. It's, as I understand, not a particularly productive building nor a productive use of the land. So some developers wish to demolish and reconstruct a new, taller, different configured building. And then there's the counterpoint, which is it's been there 100 years. It's the key to our past.
So what is the Heritage Commission? How do you weigh in on that? What's your role?
The city commissioned a consultant who's expert in divining the intention of there's a Secretary of the Interior standards for historic preservation. It's a National Park Service department.
And that's where you
And we hired a consultant to determine that it met the 2 of the 7 criteria, and on a split vote, the Preservation Commission recommended denial of the demolition permit, and it's up for City Council review and further debate.
The beat goes on. We'll keep following.
And currently I believe it's for January 18th.
Coming right up.
If you're interested, make sure you watch the City Council meeting that night.
Okay, Jeff Allman, thank you very much. Thanks for your service also.
Our Town is brought to you in part by the following amazing people and organizations.
The new Clements Subaru proudly partners with award-winning KSMQ Public Television. Clements Subaru of Rochester. Clements' clear value promise is to make buying a Subaru fast, fair, and simple. Prow Company, a hands-on commercial property leasing company. Leasing commercial properties in Rochester, Minnesota since 1952. Realtors and brokers welcome. Prow Company. The Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, and the citizens of Minnesota.
And the members of KSMQ Public Television. Thank you.
Happy New Year, Rochester. More great stories ahead on Our Town. We take a walkabout through the Machine Shed Arcade to find out the best way to stay alive on the Ghost Squad. We meet another notable woman from Rochester's past, and internet connectivity is our big question for the week. Coming up next, we check out another local acting troupe, the Rochester Repertory Theater on Our Town Culture.
Well, I'm Bill Schnell. I'm one of the directors here at the Repertory Theater, and I'm directing the next show, which is called 4,000 Miles, written by Amy Herzog.
You want a drink?
Yeah, what do you have?
I don't know.
This view is amazing!
Well, Rochester Repertory Theater is a small theater, over 30 years old now, just celebrating that anniversary. Basically, it was founded by a few friends here in town and from the Twin Cities. Some of those founding members are still part of the Repertory Theater. But originally, the word repertory meant a repetitive team of performers performing multiple shows. And over the years, it's become more of a mission statement that we're doing shows that may be outside the norm, but also entertaining, thought-provoking. The Repertory Theater is very important to Rochester. The 2 theaters that have reigned the longest, lasted the longest, the Rochester Civic Theater and the Rochester Repertory Theater, have 2 different mission statements, but have thrived with smaller audiences, larger audiences, smaller theater, larger theater, and have been the 2 mainstays of community theater in Rochester and in Southeast Minnesota, for that matter.
So, what's your deal, Mountain Man?
People over the years have felt that the Repertory Theater was kind of the go-to for a cozy experience. Not necessarily cozy as far as the show, but an intimate night where you have anywhere from 80 to 100 seats. The stage is right close. Everyone sees the actors close up. Most people know many of the actors. It's an intimate experience, and it's the people's theater as far as we're concerned.
I'm from St. Paul, and now I'm here, by the way of Seattle.
So I'm directing the show here called 4,000 Miles. It was written by Amy Herzog, won multiple awards on and off Broadway, in 2012 and 2013. The show is an experience of a grandmother and her 21-year-old grandson as he rides 4,000 miles across the United States on bike and shows up on her doorstep in Manhattan at 3 o'clock in the morning. Basically, his experiences on that trip, his experiences along the way and with his family, including the grandmother, all come to fruition as we, in fact, say her background's revolution, there's revelation and there's resolution as they kind of grow up and grow old together. That's what really it's about without getting into so many details about politics or the events on the bike trip. It's about growing up and growing old. 4,000 Miles opens on January 13th at the Rep Theater. All the shows are at 7:30. It goes from January 13th through June 29th with shows on Friday and Saturday the first weekend, then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday for 2 more weekends, and then on the 29th, which is a Sunday, a 2 p.m. matinee to finish the run. Our website, rochesterrep.org, to know more about the show, about the characters. We have a Facebook page as well, and to get tickets for the show, you go through rochesterrep.org. There's a phone number as well there in case you have questions, and all of us are available to talk through Facebook and at our website anytime.
For more information about this story and other Our Town features, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter at KSMQ #OurTown, or ksmq.org/OurTown.
There will be no shortage of things to enjoy in Rochester in 2017. Here are a few. Perhaps you want to begin the new year supporting the Rochester Public Library. The 16th annual Wit, Wisdom, and Wine event will be held Saturday, January 14th. It's a fun-filled evening of food, speakers, and dreamy gifts offered on various auctions throughout the night for a great cause. Tickets and registration online at rochesterpubliclibrary.org. If 2016 gave you the motivation to become more involved in the community, check out the city's commissions, boards, and committees. Consider service. Appointments for various positions occur throughout the year, so check out the list and see if there is something that fits your talents and your interests. Check them all out at rochestermn.gov. And if history and flying are passions of yours, the LIFE, which stands for Learning is Forever program on Tuesday, January 10th, could be right up your alley. Get a fascinating look at legendary U.S. World War II fighters through the eyes of an aeronautical engineer. Not to worry, the program is geared for non-engineers, good, to help all attendees understand the design rationale and capabilities of aircraft, like the Corsair, the F-4U, the P-51 Mustang, and more. The program is held at the History Center of Olmsted County at 2 p.m. and it's free. Speaking of free, if you haven't taken down your Christmas decorations yet, RPU is accepting old holiday lights for recycling at no charge. Just stop by the RPU Service Center at 4000 East River Road Northeast. Get those out of the way so you don't have to untangle that dud string again next year. Stay with us as we hit the machine shed for a little gaming on this week's Our Town Walkabout.
These older video games have a certain smell to them, not only the sound and not only the light, but there's a smell. My name's James Ockery. The Machine Shed is what we call a video game collective. I think it's one of those things when I was growing up in the 80s, everybody wanted to own their own video arcade. Video games nowadays are very, very linear. You buy a $60 to $80 game nowadays, and what you get is you get a game that is almost like an idiot game. It just pushes you one way. In a video game like, let's say, this Assault right here, you have many different directions you can go and you have many different things you can do. The artwork is just amazing. It's something that's going to be lost in time if there's people like us who don't preserve it. Because these are 30 to, something years old, all of them have had a repair at one time. Like a good example is this morning, this Shinobi would not turn on. We fiddled with it until we eventually got it running. It takes a lot of TLC to keep these machines running. People who collect video games, they understand the love we're putting into this thing, and the thing we're trying to do is build a small community of love that if you bring your kids in, they'll gain a bit of this love that we're trying to give out to the whole community. The idea that this boy can come in with his dad, and he can see his dad in a totally different light, experience his dad being 12 years old again, is huge to me. The 80s nowadays is 30 years past. So to step back in time and smell that wood, that kind of burnt, charred wood, and the dampness from these machines, along with the tubes just fizzling at you, it's the best in the whole wide world.
Okay, you're online and you're on a Mac, and that spinning ball, the beach ball, appears on screen while we're trying to get work done. Ugh.
This guy right here is going to tell us a little bit more about how better broadband can improve connectivity for Rochester. Stay with us.
Our past, remembering what made us who we are today. Brought to you by the History Center of Olmsted County.
Maude Mellish arrived in Rochester on March 1, 1907, at the request of Drs. Charles and William Mayo, to organize and develop a library and to do editorial work in connection with the preparation of scientific publications at Mayo Clinic. It wasn't long before all scientific and medical papers were sent to her for review before being sent for publication. Mellish wasn't new to the medical world. She graduated from the Illinois Training School for Nurses in 1887, held the position of superintendent at the Maurice Porter Memorial Hospital for Children, and was married to a physician. Mellish and her husband built Walnut Hill, a home designed in the Cotswold English style, in 1925 near Assisi Heights. Mellish died in 1933 from cancer. Mayo Clinic was closed during her funeral, and Dr. Will stated that her work at the clinic was the supreme monument to the life of a great lady.
You gotta clap when you're happy, clap when you're sad, clap when your day is good, or when it's going bad.
Broadband, it's one of those nebulous terms that to a lot of people just sounds like technical jargon. But really, quality, high-speed broadband is critical for a thriving community.
Here to help us decipher the meaning is Christopher Mitchell, Director of Community Broadband Networks at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Welcome, Christopher.
Hello.
So our big question, your opinion, is government the best way, the necessary way to bring broadband to communities?
Well, it's a very complicated, nuanced question, and I'm going to try and keep it simple.
No, we're simple people here. You can't go confusing on us. But,
so in my mind, we need local government policies to play a role. And so in some communities, that might be a very limited role, and in other communities, the local government itself might deliver internet access. There's more than 100 communities where local government's providing access to just about everyone in the community around the United States. And that works in those places pretty well. There's other places in the United States where there's a culture, they don't want local government being that involved. And so there you might have local government that's kind of building the roads and allowing private companies to use those digital roads to deliver service to both businesses and people in their homes.
So what are you doing in Rochester? What's your interest here?
Well, I went to high school in Rochester. I lived here for 5 years. They were 5 very good years of my life. I live in St. Paul now, and I work for this nonprofit organization where we work with local governments around the country where, I've advised people in Seattle, I've advised New York City, I've also advised tiny towns in Idaho. And so to the extent that I can help Rochester to develop better policy, I'm always excited to do that. There's
all about broadband.
Yes,
what you're
yeah,
about.
yeah,
Okay.
broadband, telecommunications access more broadly, but really we're talking about broadband, the ability of people to access the internet in a very good manner, at an affordable rate without prices going up all the time, a reliable connection that works all the time, and ideally a choice in providers. So there's a thriving movement here in Rochester, including a member of the City Council, that have been trying to figure out how to improve services for a while. And I think we can hope that in coming years we'll see some of the dividends from those efforts.
There's also a local organization here that's sort of lamenting some of the issues with cost and accessibility to broadband. Do you think some of these issues are warranted?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just Rochester. A lot of the United States communities, I mean, a lot of communities everywhere in the United States have these issues. Whether it's, if you're a small business, you might not be happy with the kind of services that are available. If you're a low-income resident, there's very few places where you can get high-quality internet access. Now, I think our libraries and schools, they really do a wonderful job. But if you're a single-parent household or even a double-parent household, I have a 1-year-old child right now, I'm getting used to this. The idea of having to take him to the library and wait in line for an hour to be able to search for job opportunities and things like that, it's impractical. So to the extent that I think we have communities where low-income households do not have access in the home, we have a problem that we need to solve. And I think to the extent that we do solve that problem, we will have stronger communities where kids have better opportunities and where our economy is stronger, because we're not just leaving some people out of this opportunity in the modern technological economy.
So we're really improving quality of life here. And do you think, what do you think some of the barriers are that Rochester is facing to really getting to that point?
Well, there's always barriers, right? And so I would pick one that I'm always interested in, which is the will to act. I think someone city council will look at this and think, well, I don't want to do anything about this. This is something the private sector should solve on its own. Some are going to be getting counsel from Charter or CenturyLink and the big companies that are offering service, saying there is no problem to solve. We've got this. Don't even bother taking time. And so I think we need businesses and people in Rochester to speak up and say this really is a big issue. You know, this may not be my #1 issue, but this is always my #3 issue. It's something that's in the back of my mind. You actually have in Rochester an interesting scenario in that a lot of the communities around Rochester have some of the best access in Minnesota, because there's this company that comes from Winona called HBC. And they've invested a lot in southeastern Minnesota, but not very much in Rochester. And to some extent, you may need Rochester's local government to do something about that, to make it easier for them or someone like them to come in and offer competition. But if I was going to set up a business in southeastern Minnesota, it probably would not be in Rochester. I mean, I'd love to be near Rochester, but it might be in St. Charles or someplace nearby where I know I can get this fiber optic service. And that's as jargony as I want to get, right? But fiber optic service is the standard of today. And that's a service that basically is upgradable forever. You can get super fast connectivity, both download and upload, which is something you can't get in most places in Rochester today. And I want to get it from a company where I know they're not going to raise the price year after year after year.
So you're not necessarily advocating for a government response, or are you, as far as should this be termed a utility? Should we be thinking about this along the lines of your water service or police or fire protection?
Well, being from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, I have a fundamental strong belief that people should make their decisions locally for what works for them. Sure. Now, Rochester has a really good electric utility. They have a municipal electric utility, which is somewhat rare in the United States. In the United States, there's 2,000 communities that have public power at this point. And the vast majority of them are really small. Now, Rochester is one of the larger cities that has this. And that means that you have a utility that could make investments in this area. I don't know that they're necessarily comfortable with the idea that they're going to do what Chattanooga did or what Cedar Falls, Iowa did, where that utility provides internet telephone service and cable television service to the entire community. Now, those enterprises are incredibly successful, and they've really led to job growth and people paying lower bills.
But a lot of upfront cost.
A lot of upfront costs and some risk, absolutely. And so the utility and the city council may not want to take that on. But then you look at a place like Lincoln, Nebraska, where they have a law in Nebraska that basically says city utilities cannot do this. And the utility said, well, what can we do to still get more investment in our community, because we need to do something. And so when they were engaging in other kinds of construction projects, they put conduit in the ground. And what that means is that rather than, if I was a service provider that wanted to come and compete with the cable and telephone companies, I don't have to dig up the ground anymore. I can just use this space underground that was created by the utility. They did that over a series of years, and that led to them having more competition, especially for the small businesses. But now they're getting this competition on a citywide basis, which means that every last home will have another option for this higher quality fiber optic service.
Chris Mitchell is Director of Community Broadband Networks at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Any parting question, thought?
Sure. Who should people contact if they want to weigh in on the issue or just learn more about the issue of broadband here in Rochester?
Well, I think Mike Wojcik has been a tremendous leader here on the City Council, so I would certainly reach out to him. And I would also make sure that everyone in the City Council knows that this is a pressing issue. But if you look around on Facebook, you'll find groups. If you Google Rochester, I think it's Rochester for All, but I'm not entirely positive. I should have remembered that, but there is like groups on Twitter that talk about this. So there are people that are making waves that you should pay attention to and get, join them for a meeting.
And they're advocating the government do this, or
they are advocating that the government develop a plan, I think is the main thing.
Okay.
Some may have different ideas within that group of how it should solve, but the fundamental thing is Rochester has to develop a plan.
The mindset. We have to be thinking about this, folks.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We're thinking about it now. I don't like the spinning beach ball, I must tell you.
No one does.
No one does. All right. Thank you very much for joining us. And welcome, Nicole.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
New co-host. It's an exciting time for us here on Our Town. As you can see, we're very happy to have you here as our new co-host. And I hope it's not too much trouble for you to come in and share your views. You've got a lot of great experience in Rochester.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited, and I think I'm going to learn a lot.
Cool. And we thank you for watching. We'll see you again next week on Our Town, a show about Rochester.